Welcome back, everyone. I hope everybody could enjoy their lunch and network with the others. Now we are moving on with the panel. So the next talk is a panel on data ethics, and it is led by our moderator, Marisa Chop, and featuring Anna Jobin, Leila Toplik, Dorothea Bauer, and Anna Metzener. The floor is yours, Marisa.
Thank you, Amalia. Thank you for this short introduction. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this panel here on data ethics on this exciting virtual conference here in Zurich. I'm very happy and humbled to be the moderator of this session featuring these very well-known women, which I also know very well privately. So I'm really especially honored to be here today, and I hope you're going to enjoy this. So yeah, let's start off. So actually, my first question is going to be directed at Dorothea, because, I wanted to know, do you think, if this conference would be hosted on Clubhouse, would you have joined?
Thanks for asking. Well, probably only under a different name, I guess, because I would have lost some credibility if I did so with my real name, because I have been very critical of Clubhouse recently on social media, especially. And I am actually glad I didn't face the moral dilemma I would have had if this had been the case. So thanks for saving me from that.
Good. Yeah, thanks to the conference. I could totally agree. I know Dorothea's writings very well. And Dorothea, in one of your writings, you say that the Clubhouse model goes beyond the privacy paradox. Let me check the slide.
Yes.
Yeah. You say the Clubhouse model goes beyond the privacy paradox. The issue is not whether those who join protect their own privacy, but whether they are willing to breach the privacy of others. What do you mean by that? Could you go a little bit? Could you explain a little bit for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, the privacy paradox is basically the discrepancy between our intentions to protect our privacy and our actual online behavior. We all know that there are gaps. It is the paradox of wanting privacy, but behaving as if it didn't matter. So we might feel uneasy about Facebook and Google, etc., and feel they're very intrusive. But whenever they launch a new product, we immediately click on all those terms of services to make sure we can use it. So, however, it seems in those contexts, we're basically violating our own values. We're kind of violating our convictions, our resolutions, and at least as long as it happens in contexts where we are only accountable to ourselves, that's just our problem. But the model of Clubhouse forces us to go one step further if we want to join, because it forces us to violate the privacy of others, because Clubhouse requires access to your entire contact list if you want to join and invite others. There is apparently an option to opt out of that, but then you only get 2 invites. And to be honest, Clubhouse depends on people giving them access to entire contact list, because otherwise they couldn't grow so fast. It's impossible to achieve fast growth if all people opt out. So it's like the R value in the coronavirus pandemic. R needs to be quite high to be spread effectively for the virus. So giving Clubhouse access to your entire contact list then means that it does not only know your friends, but also your lawyer, your therapist, your secret lover, your great aunt who does not even have access to the internet, and none of them agreed to have their data shared with Clubhouse. So you are violating their privacy by giving Clubhouse access, and Clubhouse will then also know who shares what friends, if these are friends, if they are not lawyers, therapists, or lovers. So, but my main point is I don't necessarily want to shame individuals for, violating privacy in that sense. No one is perfect. We're all fallible. My main point is that I find the company's business model so audacious because it obviously violates GDPR and does totally not care about it. It's like Clubhouse seems to have factored in the cost of violating GDPR into their business model, and they use dark patterns to nudge you into doing things that you do not want to and that make them benefit, not you. And so in the end, it's like the epitome of moving fast and breaking things. move fast, get all that data, grow fast without any respect for collateral damages, and hope that you earn enough money while doing so to be able to pay for compensation later, the fines. But the damage created by privacy violations is irreversible. It's not like, say, CO2 emissions, where in theory or hypothetically, you can compensate the CO2 you emit by planting trees or carbon capture technology somewhere. I mean, I'm critical about that, but it exists. But with privacy violations, it's different. Once your data and that of your friends is out there, it remains out there. It cannot be taken back. It's impossible to extract it again from all possible models into which it has been fed. So this is my main point. It's the year 2021. After countless shitstorms about privacy violations, years after Cambridge Analytica, at the same time as people leave WhatsApp over privacy concerns, Clubhouse comes to Europe with their business model that disregards any legal and ethical considerations. They exploit our human needs, which are particularly high in times of pandemic because we want to communicate and feel close to each other. And the worst thing is they seem to be successful with that. So that's my point.
Yeah. Good point. Move fast, break things. Always a classic quote, which you read a lot. I saw many nodding here from the panel. I would like to go over to Anna Metzena. I'm sure you have some comments to share with from what Dorothea about. Are you using Clubhouse model? Have you used the Clubhouse or any other of these?
I had to use Clubhouse because I was asked to listen to a talk to there, and I could not really refuse that person to do so. But before I joined it,
the privacy paradox.
yes, but I made really sure to ask all of my tech friends on how I can avoid sending out my address book to Clubhouse. So I was told that if you do not invite others, you're safe. So I'm not inviting anyone. I keep my 2 invites to myself.
Okay, great.
But I don't find the time to listen to it. So I'm not really using it, I'm just on it.
Great, thank you, Anna. Anna is the director of Algorithm Watch Switzerland. Also something I really enjoy following, and I was specifically intrigued by your newest report, the Automating Society report. And I would like to take one quote from there, which I would like to discuss with you, Anna. Face recognition. Face recognition is nearly absent from the 2019 edition of your report, and it's being trialed and deployed at an alarming rate now throughout Europe. So I've known also Dorothea has worked a lot in the topic of facial recognition, has a lot to say here. What are your opinions on this topic, Anna?
Well, what is really scary is that the first edition was issued in early 2019 and the second edition was finished in late 2020, and there was a huge difference in facial recognition. And we have to be clear about this. There are very handy uses of facial recognition. I love the fact that I can look at my phone and it unlocks. I am intrigued by the fact that I can take pictures of my children and my phone just orders them by each child with their photographs, even though from when they were a baby to up to now, the older one is going to be 8 soon. So it's a big change in his face, but it still, finds out that it's the same person. This is quite fascinating. Of course, this is just verification, and as long as it stays with me, it's not really dangerous. But as we know, facial recognition can also be used for identification of people, and then it gets a bit more problematic. Also because we don't really know when, where, and who is actually using this. There have been cases in Europe where the police had been using facial recognition for several years, and it was actually illegal for them to do so. It was legalized 5 years after they started to use it. And we can assume that they did this not only to verify who people were, but also to identify people. When we hear now that, for example, here in Zürich also, they just had to turn on more cameras to watch around the lake that people are not violating COVID rules. I'm pretty confident that the Zurich police is doing as they should and just looks at how many people there are, but we don't know. We do know that the cameras could use that technology and could identify people who are there and find out who those people are who are violating the rules. But we do not know that, and there's no way of finding that out. So it's really a black box, and that makes it difficult because this could lead to mass surveillance, and this is not something that we want in a democratic Europe, state, country, everything. So this is the setup. But there's also some good news, because the Council of Europe at the end of January published some guidelines on how to use facial recognition. Switzerland is also a member of the Council of Europe. This is not the same as the European Communion, so we are also legally bound to follow those guidelines, and they actually have a lot of good things in them. They talk about what the public sector should do. They talk about what the private sector should do. They talk about how to raise awareness in the greater public, which is a big topic because there's none. And also about how those companies who make these tools, what they should look at, and also how they should inform the other companies that buy these tools from them, how they can be aware of what they're actually dealing with. So what would be really important is to actually follow those guidelines through and turn them into laws that will make the world a better place.
We will talk more about guidelines later on. I would like to still have maybe one or two comments regarding the specific topic of facial recognition. I saw many nodding. Do you have any specific input you want to add to Anna's topics?
I'm happy to just contribute from the nonprofit perspective. So maybe taking a more global look or view on identity, which is what I want to talk about, is the fact that over 1 billion people around the world don't have a way to prove their identity. So we're looking at various ways, including contactless biometrics, around making sure that people can prove their identity so they can actually access the services that are valuable to them, like food and education and jobs and so on. So having said that, which is there is a value in being able to prove identity, and there are various ways, including biometrics, that could be used for that. Then there's this question around where is it appropriate in terms of the specific end user and the specific context to use such technology. So it's less of a conversation about technical functionality these days and ability to use it, but more around the cost to the very end user that you might be wanting to serve. So I think looking at the various use cases and then looking at the population, individuals, and communities that could be negatively impacted by the use of the technology that is meant to ultimately provide either individual or social benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anything to add from the others? Okay. I think also I kind of want to recommend Dorothea's writing here, how, sorry, I'm just a great fan of that, on an article on Medium, just really accessible to everybody who is not very tech savvy and even who's not very ethically savvy or whatsoever, or not a philosopher. How she's saying that, you know, focusing on accuracy misses the point. And this is something for me as a psychologist, for example, made me really understand that there's a difference in how we look at things. So I really want to recommend also this reading by Dorothea, who is an independent consultant, if I haven't said that before. And I think this is really something that me as a person helped me a lot to kind of navigate through these many questions I had as a non-ethicist, actually. So
Thanks, guys.
actually, Leila, thank you so much for this great input. And I also want to, I think it's extremely also important that you highlight this nonprofit perspective as well. We have research, we have business, we have also many nonprofits working on this business. And as I already mentioned before, we kind of want to also talk about guidelines. Anna has already mentioned some. You've started to talk about that. And in one of your quotes that I found highly interesting, you said that as powerful technologies like AI grow in reach and complexity, we need to shift from talking about these principles, what we do a lot, right, which is great, to connecting principles to action. Are we anywhere close to bringing those principles to action, Leila?
Yeah, it's a good question. So That came as just the as a prompt to various sectors. I work both with the nonprofit sector, especially with some of the largest global NGOs, as well as with the tech sector, to nudge everyone to shift from discussing the principles, which many of us agree around, like whether it's privacy or fairness or transparency, accountability, and get very specific around and start doing the hard work around operationalizing those principles, because that's where you see the nuanced approach to what does privacy mean, what does fairness mean, what does transparency mean. Maybe for some context for the attendees, in the recent years, there have been a number of organizations and institutions that have developed ethical principles and frameworks, really as a mechanism to highlight the important issues which we're discussing here, and also to design responsible use and development of the technologies. In fact, Berkman Klein's cyber law clinic at Harvard just recently analyzed 36 different frameworks, and not surprisingly, they actually uncovered that there is a consensus around some of the 8 key thematic areas, which we already started talking about here. So whether it's privacy, it's safety, it's security, it's transparency, it's fairness. So these frameworks, sure, they can help guide the design and use of technologies in a way that's responsible, but they're only as effective as our ability to operationalize them. And that means operationalizing them across the whole systems. The teams we hire, for example, the problems we choose to use, is it optimizing manufacturing or it is solving world hunger, for example. The data we use, how we design and implement those solutions and make them available to everyone, and even who you partner with and who you sell to. So that is just to kind of, in the summary, we really need to shift from just discussing ethical principles and demonstrating our intention to be more responsible and ethical to really doing the hard work of operationalizing them. So maybe I can just provide a couple of things that we're doing in the nonprofit sector, and really to address some of the key barriers to really closing this intention to action gap. The first barrier is around knowledge, awareness and knowledge and understanding of what are some of these risks, and then also learning how to anticipate these consequences of the technology solutions we're creating, so we can optimize for ethical outcomes, for solutions being more fair rather than biased, for example. The second is knowing what practical steps to take in order to mitigate and address the risks. And then lastly is also having the enabling environment, and that is really to say the whole organization or institution needs to be designed to motivate, to guide, and to support routine ethical behavior of the individuals and the teams, because ethical considerations in a specific technology solution, whichever one we're talking about, or a program or a partnership, really are the reflection of how ethical and responsible the whole organization is, and whether you have these processes, procedures, frameworks, incentives, trainings in place. So one of the things that you have linked on the slide is one of the ways we're addressing the learning gap in the nonprofit sector. And this is around the globe with participants from all over the place, because we need to scale these conversations to the edges, to where the work is happening. So not just in Zurich or Silicon Valley, but to places like Nairobi and Cape Town and Quito and all over the place. So we've recently released a toolkit that is designed really to help nonprofits, but also communities with which they work, learn some of the fundamentals of AI ethics, and then immediately get to practice applying these ethical considerations specifically related to the principle of fairness in the context of several humanitarian use cases. So education, workforce, health, humanitarian response, and agriculture. So what this toolkit does, maybe just briefly, it includes a step-by-step process that explores fairness across all stages of a machine learning project. And that starts with the problem definition and team formation before you even start talking about data and the algorithm, and then goes all the way through data collection, data management, model creation, implementation, and maintenance. So again, that's
Yeah.
one of the ways to close this gap.
Yeah, I think thank you, and also thank you for mentioning the topic of fairness. We had a huge discussion yesterday at the Digital Ethics Conference on fairness and what that is and how we can implement this. I think, and also providing the different opportunity for a different perspective, specifically tailored for nonprofits, is also, I think, very interesting. I also want to mention, what you said regarding, the many guidelines that have been crossing, popping up, etc. So what I always do with my students at the moment, the young bachelor students, I always use the algorithm watch inventory. I'm sure, Anna, you know that. So what I do is they have, I think, over 180 guidelines listed there, and the students can go through all these guidelines. They see the variety of guidelines that are out there right now, and they have the possibility to kind of tap into one. So first of all, I wanted to, for those who are interested, the algorithm watch inventory, I'm a big fan of that. And I'm sure yours probably also in there or already connected. So I think there are many, many things, and I totally agree with what you said. There's, kind of an overwhelm, and the market is overflooding. And this is why I'm also extremely happy to have Anna Jobin here. One of my favorite readings she published in Nature was a meta-analysis on the landscape of ethics guidelines. Highly quoted read, and she's, there's no ethics discussion without her. So, but in general, Anna, I'm happy to have you here, and I would like to discuss specifically your recommendations. How do you see the future practice, the future research? How can we combine these things, or where should we start at all? And one of my favorite quotes from you is, ethical artificial intelligence is not merely a technical issue. Ethics must also be part of the governance of AI. Now, concluding to what we've heard today from the different business models, the different guidelines, the different rules and regulations we have, how do you see the future?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for these great questions. Thank you for having me here. So, when we analyzed together with my colleagues Michele Jenke and Effie Vallena at the Health Ethics and Policy Lab in Zurich, when we did this sort of review about what ethics guideline exists, we were especially interested in what gets said, but also who is issuing these guidelines, because that means that those issuers might be proportionally get heard, which boils down to the questions: whose voices are we hearing? And this brings me to addressing one of the critique that was voiced on Twitter about these panels, that we are although we are an all, we are not an all-male panel, we are an all-white panel. And I think we can think of different issues that might be at stake also in European context about the diversity that we represent or that we do not represent. And we need to be very careful about who gets left out. And it has been a personal learning for me to be very much more attentive to such diversity, because also AI ethics is very, I mean, I have been learning a lot from especially women of colors. And I want to give a shout out to them, especially Pratyusha Kalluri, who said it's about power and not about fairness, Roman Chowdhury, Kadyusha Abdurrahman, Abe Babirane, Safia Noble, of course, Dimnit Gebru, who might be known to some by the name. She's been in the news recently, and Alex Hanna, and many others. This is so important for us, I think, because, and that's especially important at a conference like this, because data ethics is also about justice. And when you think about justice, I want us to think about intersectional justice. What does that mean? This means that we also need to think issues such as class or migration status. We need to consider that ableism is still a big problem. And we then need to be very purposeful about how to avoid not being just and not doing justice. So saying I'm just an engineer or I'm just a scientist is actually a very easy way out of these questions that, of course, we are also embedded in structures, but about how we individually handle them. Saying I am just an engineer, I am just a scientist means we refuse the potential impact our work might be having. We refuse responsibility, and eventually we act complicitly with potentially harmful structures. So when we talk about guidelines, what we did find when we analyzed these 84 ethics guidelines or principles for AI is that some of them might say, well, do no harm is very important. But doing no harm is not the same thing as purposefully try to prevent harm. And I like how Leila has already alluded to that as well before, very important. So I think I'll wrap up here to leave some time for questions for the audience, but I think it's very, very important to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Also for those, I'm not sure if this came across, I had a little bit of an issue here, but that in the beginning, there was a Twitter tweet about our conference that we are an all female white panel. I think that was the basis of the discussion. I'm not sure if everybody heard that. I had a short issue there, so I just allow myself to repeat this quickly. Yeah, so I mean, in this not even half hour, we really just kind of, could talk about the glimpse of a little bit of what is important. I hope that these are just steps or ideas for the viewers to, what are the next steps I want to do? Where should I go? Where should I look for? Whom should I Google to get help? And there would be Amalia. Have you gathered some questions from the audience? I don't hear you. You're on mute. Mute.
Thank you very much. It was a fascinating discussion. Yes, we do have some questions from the audience. One of them is, we want our privacy and personal data safe, but we also want great services, which require great amounts of data these days. How to deal with these two opposite topics?
Can I take this one? Because this is exactly my question. Why it should not be up to individual. It's not just a technical issue. It will never be solved by one more button on one more individual choice in one more service or on one more device that someone should or should not accept or not. This is a governance issue. This is the big questions about what is the cost of being non-ethical for business, for NGOs, or even, for public sector organizations. Who do we entrust with making sure that what is happening is what we want to be happening? When I say we as a society.
Thank you. Another question that was being asked is, what would be the first advice you'd give to an AI practitioner or data scientist working directly with algorithms? In terms of ethics, of course.
Could I just maybe mention two things that are very important, especially for the populations, for the communities and contexts that are oftentimes not visible, those who are sitting in, let's say, Redmond or Silicon Valley, which is to understand the problems of the people that this specific solution might need to solve, understand their context and what is actually appropriate or not, especially as we talk about technologies. They're oftentimes off-the-shelf technologies that are meant to be used in various contexts where the cost of using that could actually be much greater in terms of causing harm to some of the populations and communities. And then lastly, to think about the education that needs to accompany that specific solution. So let's talk about data literacy, for example. So those are some of the things to consider.
Thank you. Should we take in one more quick question or done?
We still have 1 minute, so I would really like to take this last question to those interested to get into the field of data and ethics. Where should we start? Question from our audience, and I think you are the best to answer it, right? I
mean, I cannot give any really great clear advice because it has grown so erratically, organically for me, so I have to delegate this question to others. But always be curious and ask questions. Like, that's very general, and be critical. That's not a career advice.
Definitely. I could.
There are many great places to start. I mean, already asking this question is a great place to start. If I have to put out just one great name to how to prevent harm, or maybe to be more conscious about the potential violence that might be done through data science, I would have to shout out Anna Lauren Hoffman, who is a researcher specialized on data ethics.
By the way, about careers, there is a job board on AI ethics job on the All Tech is Human website now. So if you really, care for specific jobs, you might want to take a look there.
Nice.
Thank you all for the very interesting panel discussion. Thanks a lot for accepting our invitation to join the conference. And now I would like to invite everyone to the mentorship tables, which are from M1 to M12. You will find each of the subject that one mentor has on our website. So just feel free to drop in their room and start discussing about the topics that interest you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the
having us.
invitation.